There's a version of you that you keep telling yourself you'll become. Maybe it's the version that finally has enough money. The one that isn't anxious every Sunday night. The one that woke up one day and just figured it out. You've thought about this person 100 times. What their mornings look like, what they stopped worrying about, how differently they carry themselves. And yet, here you are, still doing the same things, still getting the same results, still waiting for something to shift. Most people blame discipline. They think, if I could just be more consistent, more motivated, more focused, things would change. But I want to offer you a different idea today. What if the thing that's actually running your life isn't your discipline, your habits, or your effort, but something you almost never think about? What if the real problem is happening underneath all of that, in a part of your mind you've never been taught how to use? That's what we're going to talk about today.
Let me describe someone. You might recognize this person. They work hard. They're not lazy. They genuinely want things to be better, financially, emotionally, professionally. They've tried to change multiple times. They've read things, watched things, maybe even taken a course or two, but there's this invisible ceiling. Every time they get close to something good, a job, a relationship, a financial step forward, something pulls them back. Sometimes it's an external thing, but a lot of times it's them, their own choices, their own reactions, their own voice inside their head telling them it won't work, it never does. People like us don't get those kinds of breaks. And the frustrating part, they know logically that this thinking isn't helping. They know they should be more optimistic. They know they're self-sabotaging, but knowing it doesn't stop it. That gap between knowing something and actually living it is one of the most common and painful places a person can be stuck in. And almost nobody talks about why that gap exists. We're told to think positive. We're told to set goals. We're told to believe in ourselves. But we're almost never told why, despite doing all of that, the same patterns keep showing up. The answer, as a man named Joseph Murphy spent most of his life trying to explain, lies not in your conscious mind, the part that sets goals and makes plans, but in your subconscious mind, the part that's been quietly recording everything since before you could even speak.
Let's start with something basic that most people get wrong. When we talk about the mind, we tend to think of it as one thing, one brain, one you, one set of decisions. But that's not really how it works. Think of your mind as two separate departments running inside you at the same time. The first department, the conscious mind, is the one you're using right now to listen to this. It's your logic, your analysis, your ability to make deliberate choices. It reasons, it evaluates. It says, that sounds like a good idea, let me try it. The second department, the subconscious mind, is older, deeper, and far more powerful than most people realize. It doesn't reason, it doesn't evaluate, it simply accepts and executes whatever it's been programmed with, like a machine that runs exactly the software it was given, no questions asked. Now here's where this gets important. Your subconscious mind controls roughly 95% of your behavior. Not 50%, not 70%, 95%. Your breathing, your heartbeat, your posture, your automatic emotional reactions, the way you feel when someone criticizes you, the way your stomach tightens before a big meeting, the way you talk yourself out of things before you even try. All of that is your subconscious running programs that were written mostly before you were 12 years old. Murphy used a simple comparison. He said the subconscious mind is like soil. It doesn't care what you plant in it. Roses or weeds, it will grow both with equal enthusiasm. The soil has no opinion, it just produces. And the seeds, those are your thoughts, your repeated beliefs, your habitual emotional states. Whatever you plant consistently, that's what grows. That's what becomes your life. This isn't poetry. This is the actual mechanism behind why people stay stuck. Because most people have spent years planting seeds they didn't even know they were planting. Let me tell you about a pattern I've seen play out in so many different people's lives.
A person grows up in a household where money was always tight. Not abusive, not traumatic, just tight. Conversations at the dinner table were often about what they couldn't afford, about how things cost too much, about how the rich get richer and regular people just have to make do. Nobody told this person you will never be successful. Nobody said money is not for people like us. But that message, repeated in 100 small ways week after week, year after year, got absorbed by the subconscious like water into dry earth. Fast forward 20 years. This person has a decent job. They're smart. They work hard. But every time they get close to a financial breakthrough, something happens. They make a bad investment. They trust the wrong person. They avoid an opportunity because it felt too risky. They spend money impulsively the moment they have extra. And they can't explain it because consciously they want more. They're trying. But beneath that conscious wanting, the subconscious is running an older, more deeply installed program that says, this isn't for you. Don't reach too high. Get back to where it's safe. Murphy called this an inner conflict. The conscious mind wants one thing, the subconscious believes another. And in that conflict, the subconscious almost always wins. Because it's not fighting fair, it's operating below your awareness. This is why telling yourself to just think positive often doesn't work, because you're not touching the actual problem. You're painting the surface while the foundation remains unchanged.
Now let's talk about how this programming actually happens. Because once you understand the mechanism, you can start working with it instead of against it. The subconscious mind is most open, most receptive to new programming in two states. The first is early childhood, before the critical faculty of the conscious mind has fully developed. Children absorb beliefs like sponges. They have no filter yet. Whatever they see, hear, and repeatedly experience gets recorded as truth. The second state is the hypnagogic state, the drowsy period just before you fall asleep and just after you wake up. In those minutes, the critical barrier between the conscious and subconscious relaxes. The mind becomes impressionable again, like it was when you were a child. Murphy was very specific about this. He said, the thoughts you hold in your mind as you're drifting off to sleep are among the most powerful seeds you can plant. Because in that state, they go directly into the subconscious without being filtered or analyzed. Think about what most people do right before bed. They scroll through their phones, they replay the worst moments of the day, they worry about tomorrow. They lie there running mental simulations of everything that could go wrong. And all of that goes in, directly, without resistance. The subconscious doesn't know the difference between something you're imagining and something that's real. It processes both the same way. So if you fall asleep every night feeling anxious about money, the subconscious records money is a source of anxiety, and it builds its programming accordingly. This isn't mystical, it's actually quite mechanical once you see it clearly. One of the most useful things Murphy ever wrote was about the specific language the subconscious responds to. The subconscious doesn't respond well to vague wishes, it responds to feeling. Let me explain what I mean. If you tell yourself, I want to be successful, that statement lives entirely in the conscious mind. It's intellectual. It creates no emotional charge. The subconscious yawns and moves on. But if you can genuinely feel in your body, in your chest, in your nervous system, what success actually feels like, the relief of it, the quiet confidence of it, the specific texture of that life, if you can hold that feeling for even a few minutes and repeat it consistently, that is a seed. That is language the subconscious understands. Murphy described it as the difference between a desire and an impression. You can desire something consciously forever and nothing changes, but when a feeling is deeply impressed upon the subconscious, felt, repeated, and believed at some level, it begins to reorganize your behavior, your perception, and your decisions in ways that align with that feeling. Here's the practical side of this. Think about people who have experienced sudden, unexpected shifts in their life. A person who recovered from a long illness nobody thought they'd recover from.
a person who rebuilt their finances after being completely broke, a person who found a relationship after years of being alone. Often, when you ask them what changed, they struggle to explain it. They say something like, "I just decided, something shifted, I stopped believing it was impossible." What actually happened in many of those cases was a shift at the subconscious level. A new impression replaced an old one. And once that shift occurred, their behavior changed naturally, without force, without willpower battles. Murphy believed this kind of shift could be cultivated deliberately, not accidentally, not through luck, through consistent, intentional communication with the subconscious mind. There's something worth pausing on here, because it connects to something most people experience but never fully examine. Have you ever walked into a room and immediately felt something was wrong before anyone said anything? Have you ever had a gut feeling about a decision that your rational mind couldn't justify? Have you ever just known something without knowing how you knew it? That's not intuition in some vague, magical sense. That's your subconscious mind, which has been processing information continuously, pattern matching, reading microsignals in people's faces, voices, and environments, surfacing a conclusion that your conscious mind hasn't caught up to yet. Murphy made a point about this that I found striking. He said most people treat their gut feelings as unreliable and their conscious reasoning as the authority. But the conscious mind sees only what's in front of it. The subconscious has access to a far wider data set, everything you've ever experienced, every pattern you've ever absorbed, every signal your body has registered. The problem isn't that the subconscious is unreliable. The problem is that if its programming is built on fear, on past failures, on limiting beliefs, then even its instincts will reflect those things. It will intuitively steer you away from opportunities because it has been taught that opportunities are dangerous. This is why changing the subconscious isn't just about thinking better thoughts. It's about healing old programming, replacing fear-based recordings with something more accurate, more open, more aligned with who you actually want to be. I want to be careful here, because this is where a lot of people take Murphy's ideas and turn them into something unrealistic. They hear, the subconscious is powerful, and they leap to, if I just visualize things hard enough, they'll appear in my life. That's not what Murphy was saying, or at least not the full picture. Murphy was a practical man. He wasn't selling magic. He was pointing to a mechanism. Here's what he actually meant about belief. When you genuinely believe something, not just say it, but feel it at a deep level, it changes how you operate. You notice different things, you take different actions, you respond to setbacks differently. You persist where before you would have quit. He talked about a surgeon who had operated successfully on thousands of patients. This surgeon had a deep, quiet belief in his own competence. Not arrogance, not performance, a settled, internalized certainty. And what that certainty produced was steadiness under pressure, clear thinking in difficult moments, the ability to make decisions without second-guessing at every turn. Contrast that with someone who steps into the same role while secretly carrying the belief that they're not really qualified, that they're somehow faking it. Every decision becomes heavy. Every mistake feels catastrophic. Every challenge confirms the inner story that they shouldn't be here. Same external situation, completely different internal landscape, and completely different results. Belief isn't passive. It's a filter through which you experience everything. It shapes what you attempt, what you finish, what you walk away from, and what you keep returning to. And the subconscious is where belief actually lives, not in the affirmations you repeat, but in what you actually feel to be true at 3 a.m. when nothing is performing and nobody is watching. Murphy's work went beyond just career and money, and I think it's worth sitting with that for a moment. He documented cases, many of them, of people who had been told by doctors that their condition was permanent, who recovered after a shift in their mental and emotional state. He wasn't denying medicine. He wasn't anti-science. He was pointing to something that modern research has since begun to validate. The mind and body are not separate systems. Chronic stress physically deteriorates the body. Prolonged hopelessness measurably weakens immune function. The feeling of being trapped, of being a victim of your circumstances, creates a biochemical environment in the body that makes healing harder. Conversely, and this is the part Murphy spent the most energy on, a genuine shift in mental state can change physical outcomes. Not because of magic, because the body responds to the mind. The subconscious controls the autonomic nervous system. It regulates hormones. It directs healing resources. It either facilitates or hinders the body's natural capacity to recover. He talked about the placebo effect, not as a trick or a fraud, but as evidence of the subconscious mind's power. A person takes a sugar pill, genuinely believes it's medicine, and their body responds as if it received medicine. That response is real. The change in the body is measurable. What Murphy was saying is, what if we could use this same mechanism deliberately, consciously, consistently, not just in medical trials, but in everyday life? What if belief itself, genuinely held, emotionally felt belief, is one of the most underused tools a human being has access to?
Here's what most people don't realize. The beliefs that are running your life right now, most of them were formed when you were a child, and you've been living inside them so long that you've stopped seeing them as beliefs. You've started seeing them as facts. I'm not good with money. That's not a fact. That's a recording. I've never been lucky. That's not a fact. That's a pattern of perception shaped by an internal story. People like me don't get those kinds of opportunities. That is absolutely not a fact. That is a seed someone planted. Maybe an old teacher, maybe a parent, maybe your own past failures, and you've been watering it ever since without realizing it. The compound effect of negative subconscious programming is slow and invisible. It doesn't announce itself. It just quietly shapes which conversations you avoid, which risks you don't take, which relationships you settle for, which ceilings you accept. And because it's quiet, because it feels normal, most people never question it. They think the problem is outside them: the economy, bad timing, other people, bad luck. And sometimes those things are real. The external world has genuine obstacles. But Murphy's point was, the same external conditions produce wildly different outcomes in different people. And the variable that most explains that difference isn't intelligence, isn't privilege, isn't talent. It's the subconscious operating system they're running.
So, what do you actually do with this? I want to be clear. Changing subconscious programming isn't fast. It's not a 3-day exercise. It's not something you do once and check off a list. It's a gradual process, like physical therapy after an injury. You do the work consistently, and over time, things change. But there are real starting points. The first one is paying attention to your self-talk, specifically in your lowest moments. Not the stuff you say publicly, not the optimistic things you tell people. What do you actually say to yourself when something goes wrong? When you fail? When you look at your bank account and feel that familiar sinking? Those statements are the clearest window into your subconscious programming. Write them down. Be honest. Most people have never done this, and it's uncomfortable when you start to see the patterns. The second is the sleep window. Murphy was very specific about this. The 15 to 20 minutes before you fall asleep are powerful. Don't spend them in anxiety spirals. Don't spend them doom scrolling. Use that window. Hold a clear, felt image of something you want to be true. Not the wanting of it, but the feeling of it already being true. And let yourself drift to sleep in that state. It will feel uncomfortable at first, forced. Your conscious mind will push back and say, "This is ridiculous. Nothing has changed." That resistance is normal. Do it anyway. Do it consistently. The subconscious responds to repetition and emotion, not logic. The third thing, and this is less discussed, is to stop feeding the old story. Every time you tell someone, "I've always been terrible with money," you reinforce that program. Every time you say, "I'm just not the type of person who," you cement a belief that was never a fact to begin with. This doesn't mean performing false positivity. It means being more careful about the casual stories you tell about yourself, because the subconscious is listening, always. And finally, be patient with yourself in this.
You didn't build these patterns in a week. You won't undo them in a week. But the fact that you understand the mechanism now, that's not nothing. That's actually the hardest part for most people. They never even get here. They never stop to ask, why do I keep doing this? They just assume they're broken. You're not broken. You're just running old software, and software can be updated.
Joseph Murphy spent decades trying to help people understand something that now, with everything we know about neuroscience and psychology, seems increasingly obvious. You are not just your conscious mind. The part of you that sets goals, makes plans, and evaluates information is only a thin layer of what's actually happening inside you. Beneath that is something vast. Something that has been shaped by every experience you've ever had. Something that is running your life in ways you can't fully see. But the fact that it's been shaped before by circumstances you didn't choose means it can be shaped again by you, deliberately. That's the whole idea. Not positivity as a performance, not affirmations as a ritual, but a genuine, consistent effort to change what you believe at a deep level, to feel differently about yourself, to plant different seeds and tend them with patience. The results won't come all at once, they rarely do, but you'll start to notice small things, decisions that feel slightly lighter, reactions that aren't quite as heavy, opportunities you don't talk yourself out of quite as quickly. That's the shift beginning. And that's enough to start with.